you very much for inviting Donna and myself today. We're keen to share our experience of business continuity. We've been leading emergency planning and business continuity for about 10 years now at Braintree. Feels like longer.
Nearly.
Yeah. And we're in a fairly good position now at Braintree, but it has taken a long while to get to that point. So, recent stat we saw recently is that about 90% of UK businesses have a business continuity plan in place. SMEs is about 70%, so about 1 in 3 doesn't have a BC plan, and it is something that is absolutely essential. Business continuity is basically a response to a crisis of some sort. So again, you've alluded to the fire. I've put a photo of the fire on there. I don't know if you remember back in 2013, we had the floods in Whittam. Whittam High Street was a bit like Little Venice. And the key challenge you have is being hacked by some form of cyber attack. And at local authority level, that's something that we see in terms of cyber attacks on a daily basis. So we get about 20,000 attacks a day for local government. It's phenomenal. And all it takes is one of those to get through our firewalls, and we're in a world of hurt. Redcar in Cleveland, about 5 years ago, they had a ransomware attack, and 4 years on, they still haven't got everything back, and it completely knocked them out. So where it's great to move technology forward and be reliant on networks and systems, actually it does create a huge vulnerability, and the investment you need to make to protect that is huge. And at Braintree, it's one of our key areas that we focus on, because pretty much all our services, even down to our waste collections, because the trucks run off a collection system, so they've got their computers in the cabs. Literally every service we provide is linked to ICT, and we've got a huge dependency there, so it's something we have to focus on. For SMEs, business continuity is important. So business continuity is basically putting a plan in place for various eventualities, and it's just working through what the eventualities might be and coming up with contingencies to address them. SMEs, in many ways, are more vulnerable than larger firms because you have a small number of locations, small number of people. Sometimes it's just one person. You often just have one supplier or system, which does increase that vulnerability and the capacity to be able to absorb those shocks. So BC business continuity is about standing your business back up again as quickly as you possibly can. So where you've been affected by something, be it a flood in the building or your IT's been knocked out, it's getting those services back up and running, getting those products out to the market and retaining your customers. So some of the disruptions that you may experience, building-wise, it could be fire, flood, power outages, IT failures, things like that. Staff resources, it could be down to illness, resignations, or people have got care responsibilities. So again, using our organisation's example at Braintree, when schools are closed, at the moment many schools are being closed because of the hot weather. That's an example where a lot of parents have got to be operating at home, working at home from home, which is something what we've adopted at Braintree is where we can, a flexi agile working system. So you've got the choice of being either in the office or working from home, and our network's set up so we can be in either and still do your Teams calls and everything else. Technology, again, everything's all completely interlinked now. So at Braintree, our phone systems are linked to through Teams, along with our email and everything else. There's a risk of software or data being unavailable. That's always a concern where you go down the route of going with just one supplier for your IT services, that can prove challenging. Supplier delivery issues. Again, if you've got a single supplier, if you have a delay or a failure, that causes problems in business continuity. So a good business continuity plan focuses on what really matters, sets out clear practical steps to respond to whatever type of incident that occurs. So at Braintree, we've got a number of critical services. So they include things like finance, IT, things like that. So if they fail, we can't pay people's benefits, we can't take payments into the council tax, things like that. So as an example, that's where we need to get those restored as quickly as possible. Or if it's time sensitive, so for example, if we get in the middle of an election, we've got statutory obligation to carry that election through in the time frame that's been dictated to us. If we have outages of whatever nature or problems of whatever nature, we have to overcome that and make sure we've delivered that on time. It's important to focus on the services or processes that, if they're lost, would affect customers' income or reputation. So it's ensuring you save face and your customers have got confidence that if you've suffered a disruption, you'll stand yourselves back up quite quickly and be able to then continue that service. So dependencies. So once you've identified your critical activities, it's understanding what they depend on. So people, particularly in SMEs, is absolutely key. So it's understanding who's got what key roles in your business, who's got skills and specialist knowledge, and it's just making sure that those roles are shared out across your organisation, so you've got some level of resilience there. Premises, machinery, it's making sure your premises are both secure but also resilient to things like flooding or fire, so you make sure you get regular electricity testing, things like that, to make sure you're minimising that risk, and making sure we have combustible materials that are kept away from things like risk of electrical fire. Technology, again, IT, there's always concern if you just go with one IT specialist to provide your needs, and it's worth having alternatives in place. Data is absolutely key, and I'll come on to that, but with data, it's one of those things where what we've done with all our services is say to them, don't keep it just in one place on the network, because if you do that, the problem you risk is, like Redcar and Cleveland had, when they got hacked and that data was no longer accessible, that was it. They didn't know who their clients were, they've got no way of contacting them, they don't know what's going on. I've experienced IT outage for about 2 weeks with another organisation I work for, and I came in on Monday morning, discovered that I had no email, no calendar, no nothing, everything was done electronically. I was okay for the first couple of meetings, I remembered who I had first. The rest of the day, not a clue. And by the end of the day, they sent everyone home because they didn't know, had no access to emails, didn't know what meetings, it just causes absolute chaos. And it's just understanding that and coming up with some way of preventing it as best you can. So, good thing to do is share devices, so spread your data and your information that you need across devices, which is what we recommend, because otherwise you're in that scenario where if everything's networked, it's fine up until it isn't. And when we do training exercises, what we like to do is when we sit down with our team that we're training, is just walk over, take away their phone, or just take away their laptop and then go, carry on delivering your service. They look at you blankly. They can't. So it's what can you do? And I'll come on to some of the workarounds later on. Suppliers, Again, absolutely key that who you rely on, and that's another area where I would say think about. So it's absolutely great getting your own business continuity plan in place, which is absolutely essential. But when you've chosen your suppliers, you've gone through your procurement process to choose a supplier, have you actually thought about what is their resilience? What contingencies have they got in place to ensure that their company can continue to deliver that service or product to you in order for you to continue your business? It's worth thinking about because if they come unstuck, again, unless you've got 2 or 3 alternatives potentially there you can go to, it causes a huge amount of problems. And it's a challenge when it's particularly things like foreign firms as well. So if you're reliant on say, I don't know, a product coming from say Jakarta in Indonesia, if there's an outbreak of civil war or something like that, and airport shut down and everything else, freight lines close, how do you get your product? Unless you've got contingency as a plan B. So it's worth thinking about things like that. So it's identifying what your risks are and then looking at the impact of those risks. So it could be about the inability to deliver a service or a product, which then leads to a loss of income, reduced customer service, and then starts hitting your reputation. So it's time critical to get yourself stood back up again. So when you look at putting your business continuity plan together, and what we'll share, we've got a guide here, which there's a slide at the end of this which has got lots of links. There's loads of information out there on BC plans. It's not a case of starting with a blank sheet of paper. There's information through Essex and us where you can get the basic template for your BC plan, starter for 10, and it just guides you through putting that in place. So what you need to have in place in your plan are things like deciding who makes the decisions, and if that person isn't there, who will take charge and make their decisions on your behalf or the company's behalf. During that incident, how will information be shared? That's one of the other key ones. So how we set priorities. So you want those already set out in your plan, so you understand you've got something to go to, and which decisions need to be pushed up the command tree for sign off. How we communicate with staff. So what we have, all our services, the teams will have a WhatsApp group. That's completely separate to the organisation. So if we did lose our network, the individual WhatsApp groups the teams have got, and we've got senior management WhatsApp groups as well that we link into, they will still function. So if you have a scenario where your email's gone, we've got a way of communicating, which is important. Things like if you've had a fire on your premises, or there's been flooding, staff can't get to work, have you got, as a leader of your company, have you got all the contact details not on site somewhere? Have you got it in your phone or a sheet of paper at home? Have you got that information to hand? So you can contact not only your team that you work with, but also things like supplier lists and everything else. Because that's one of the key things. If you haven't got access to that off-site, that will cause a huge amount of problems. Should that worst case scenario happen, that there's a fire or there's flood or something else. Important to keep customers and suppliers informed so they know what's going on. So again, using that example of Redcar and Cleveland local authority, they're having to communicate straight away, or others on their behalf are having to communicate straight away that they've been hacked and to not open any emails coming from them, things like that. So again, it's just having those contingencies in place. focus on clear leadership. So you've got your plan. That's how you set out your framework for responding to something. That enables you to have clear leadership, and also helps with simple decision making as well, and reliable communication. The hardest thing, I think, is if you haven't got a plan and one of those scenarios, be it flood, fire, famine, COVID, round 2, or being hacked, if that does occur, if you haven't got your plan in place, you're instantly on the back foot, because you're in a position where you've got the adrenaline pumping, you're not making rational decisions, you're having to come up with a plan on the hoof. That is really, really hard. It's not only having got to come up with a plan, you've then got to deliver it. If you've got a BC plan in place, you've got your go-to, you've got your set of processes that you know you've decided they're tailored to you, that's what you will follow to get your business back up and running again. And all you're then doing is responding to those. You're not having to try and think about, what would I do? So it cuts out that thought process, because that's already been done and it's not in heat at the moment. And I think that is one of the biggest challenges. So when you look at other organisations such as Blue Light Services or military, they're trained on a regular basis to respond to an emergency. Most of us, we aren't in that scenario. So when we respond, we need a guide to refer to. And that's why it's important to have that BC plan in place. Always worth testing and updating your plans. So we encourage our services to do annual assessment of their plans to make sure they still fit for purpose. And when they do their annual business planning each year, and they may change some of their service or their processes or policies, we say, go back, look at your BC plan, is it still fit for purpose? If not, update it. We would say the same as well. So if something's changed within your company in that last 12 months, identify what those things are and reflect that in an updated BC plan. Again, making sure everyone's up to speed with it all, review the roles, responsibilities to ensure they're all clear. As I said, figure out what's changed in the plan since it was last updated. So I think this will be shared with everyone anyway, but here a list of links for really useful information on putting together your BC plan. And both Essex County Council and ourselves are more than happy to chat to anyone who's got any questions about putting their plan together. But it's important to make sure that plan is tailored to yourselves, so you've got something that works for you, rather than just going for something that's completely generic, because it's important to make sure that it will support you in getting your business back up and running.